Good morning, everybody. My name is Lauren Farmer. I'm with the West Virginia Statewide After School Network, and you are in the session Creating Workplace Wellbeing, Supporting Staff's Health and Wellbeing. Before we introduce our speakers, I want to remind you guys that if you are wanting STARS credit, make sure that your name is your full name. You can rename yourself by right-clicking, I think, somewhere in your video, but make sure your full name is visible. And with us today, we have Sherry Swint and David Lee. Sherry Swint is the West Virginia Department of Education Coordinator supporting the 21st Century Community Learning Centers program. As a former WVU Extension Professor assigned to Kanawha County Extension Service, she has over 10 years of out-of-school time experience. Prior professional experience includes federal grant management, nonprofit program management, and adult education. David Lee is the director of the Office of Student Support and Wellbeing within the West Virginia Department of Education. David has over 40 years of experience in the education field, including being a teacher, principal, and an administrator. Welcome and thank you so much today for coming today to share with us about creating workplace well-being.
Well, thank you all. I'm glad that you're here, and I hope most of you were able to see the session on self-care, because that was and in fact, I just got through saying it. It was a great session. If not, to go back and see the recording on it would be an excellent thing to do, because one of the things about the workplace is making sure that all people that are in your after-school program are working there, that they do manage their self-care situation, so that when they come in the after-school program and those after hours, that they're energetic, that they have the ability to carry on after a long school day, because it is difficult. A long school day can cause you a situation where you might have been stressed, and being able to leave that and work in the after-school program is important. As a director, as a supervisor, or whatever, making sure that that workplace environment is not toxic, and making sure that workplace environment is conducive for success is very important. And that's some of the things that we're going to talk about today. And I have no control of the slides.
Can you see them? Okay, good.
Yeah, here we go. I love this slide because this reminds me of some classrooms that I've had as a teacher, where I had a study hall once that I had 105 kids in a study hall. And I'm just thinking, what am I going to do? How in the world are we going to survive the whole year? I walked into schools as a principal in a very toxic environment and thought, oh gosh, have I made the right decision walking in this environment? And so one of the things that you can do, you can address the situations that you have control of, or you can ignore it. And if you ignore it, it will have such a stressful impact on you that it will affect you physically, it will affect you emotionally, spiritually. And so the thing about it is, what do we do? How do we address these issues? Now, stress, we know, causes a lot of problems. Your attention span is decreased, your memory loss, learning. One of the things about stress is that you're just you're forgetful about things that you want to do, because that burden is on you all the time. It makes it tough to make decisions. You question yourself. That's the one thing about stress that I've noticed with a lot of people, even myself in the past, is that when I'm under a lot of stress and duress, I question my decisions. I question whether or not this is the right thing to do. And being in charge of a program, being in charge of a school, being in charge of an after-school program, that's the one thing that we want to alleviate, is those decisions. Relationships. Here's the one, I'll say this, because I'll go off script quite a bit, so you'll just have to bear with me. It's essential that you do not take home the stress of the day, because it causes such a burden in your family, your children, your wife, your spouse, whatever. It's hard to say, I'll leave it at home, I'll leave it at work, and I go home. It is difficult, but I'm telling you, for a healthy relationship, You've got to be able to deal with stress in such a way that it does not impact relationships at home. Your health and well-being, your blood pressure. You know, you don't want to put yourself in so much stress as far as your work environment that when you go home, you're about to have a stroke or you're about to have a heart attack. So stress has that kind of impact. And then you're just not as productive. Because of stress, you're just not as productive in the work environment. And as an administrator or as a person who's in charge of an after-school program, you want to make sure that the people that are working there are performing at the highest level, because it's imperative for success for the students that are there. This is a great video. It's about 4 minutes long. Hopefully we'll get to see it. And I want you to think about it when you watch this, because it really will kind of give you almost a self-evaluation at a point of where your stress level is.
Can you see the new screen?
I see the screen and the link, but I don't see the video.
Okay, hold on. We hit share.
Okay.
Now, can you all see it?
Yes, we can.
So I have in my hand a bottle of
And can you hear it?
Yes.
Could you hear it? Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
water, and it's just an average bottle of water. There's nothing particularly different or unique about this bottle of water. But it is a bottle, and it does contain water, and I've just removed the cap. So here's my question. Why is there water on the floor? Why is there water on the floor? Any guesses? Because there was a shaking? All right, thank you for playing. Wrong. We're going to make this fun, aren't we? Why is there water on the floor? I took the cap off and I allowed the water to go on the floor. Wonderful answer. Wrong. Thank you for playing. Isn't this much fun? I shook a full bottle of water. And Lou, that's a great answer, but again, it's wrong. We might think of a lot of reasons why there might be water on the floor. We could think that maybe there's water on the floor because of gravity. And as already has been said, because I took the cap off or because there's a shaking. But here's what we know that is universally true. The reason why there's now water on the floor is because there was water in the bottle. And I want you to reflect on that for just a moment as a metaphor, as an example of what we're going to be talking about today in terms of stress, body arousal, compassion fatigue. And what I'd like to suggest to all of us is that the shaking is not abnormal. It is the normal part of life and the work experience. The shaking is normal. And the reason why there is water spilling out onto the floor from the bottle has less to do with the shaking, and it has much more to do with there's water in the bottle. Now, if we compare this, a bottle that's now only nearly full, as a moment ago it was completely full of water, if we compare that to this bottle where the water level is not filled, but much lower, pointing out that the water level is here. And when this bottle of water experiences the very same shaking, there's little to no water that spills out. So in this demonstration today, we're creating an awareness and a context that the water level is kind of representative of the level of stress, and in some situation, toxic stress or compassion fatigue, either in the workplace or even in our own personal life. And our goal today, and the goal that's a part of our mission for the work that we do and for the people for whom we serve is not about getting the shaking to stop, because that's not something that's within our reach. So overcoming compassion fatigue with professional resiliency is not about stopping the triggers, stopping the shaking, or somehow magically changing our work environment to be ideal. But in fact, we're overcoming compassion fatigue with our own personal, professional resiliency, which in fact lowers our stress levels, lowers our toxicity, so that we have a lower threshold and an optimum range for tolerating changes in the environment.
You can see why that's such a great video. In fact, I'll be honest with you, I used that at a church service. I'm an associate pastor too, and I used it as a church service. And I really stressed that shaking takes place with everyone. You're going to encounter kids that come from unbelievable situations that will shake you. You're going to have things that happen to you personally that a shaking will take place. The question is, have you built resiliency up to the point where when that shaking takes place, that you don't spill out of the bottle, that you still remain in, even though the shaking occurs? When you're at school during the day and you're going into an after-school program, you don't have really a clue what's going to happen that day. You don't know what's going to be brought into you as issues or problems, and then to take that and go into the workplace and the after-school program is a great challenge. So what we're going to hopefully be able to discuss a little bit today, how do I build that resiliency up? How do I create a work environment in an after-school program that I have a staff that they thoroughly enjoy coming to work after school? And the reason why they enjoy it is because they have freedoms, they have liberty to show their creativity, they have an ability to do something different from the regular workday. And as the director, as the administrator of any kind of program, one of the most important things to do is to make sure that your staff, they're able to use their abilities and their talents in such a way that when shakings do happen, that there's not an overflow or spilling. The second state, let me put it that way, and I've been in this business for 44 years. This is my 44th year in education in some way. The second state that I went to after I retired in Virginia as a principal, I went to an independent school, and the school was toxic. I mean, it was toxic. They'd had 4 principals in the last 6 years. And so when I had an interview with the superintendent, she was telling me about the toxic situation that was happening with the staff, whatever. And come to find out that the toxicity was caused by the stress level between the central office and the teachers. And unfortunately, that school system was so small that the central office was actually inside of the school. Their offices were actually inside the school with teachers and, of course, the principal. And so the challenge that I had was to, how do I make sure that staff members, number one, they can trust me as a principal. Number two, they know I'm very supportive. And number three, what are some of the things that we can do that we can overcome some of the compassion fatigue that had already occurred? Compassion fatigue is basically this. When you come to a point where you just don't care, I mean, you just exist. The negatives have built up so much, you're just existing in a program. So one of the things I had to do, and it didn't happen overnight. Listen, none of this happens overnight. And I'd say that 99% of you have great programs. You're not dealing with this, but if you do, be prepared. What can I do in the workplace to make it even better? Even if your programs are good right now, the thing that you need to strive for is, how can I make it better? How can I make it more engaging for students? How can I ease some of the stress that staff's going under? So the fatigue was so bad with teachers at that point, we had to do some simple things. Well, for example, what? Number one, I had to reinforce the talent that they had. Instead of the negative impact and negative comments that they'd received over the past years, I tried to find something positive that I could see to make it as an impact to actually tell them that this skill that they have. And not only by using that skill, but because of that skill, they have the ability to stretch beyond that. When they maintain that trust with myself as the administrator, that school went from the bottom third in the state of Kentucky as far as test scores to the middle third in 2 years. It was that big of an impact. Now, we did a lot of things together too. We had dinners together. We went to activities together. So it was one of those things that was really a family situation to try to overcome some of the compassion fatigue that existed. Now, compassion satisfaction and compassion fatigue is completely different. In fact, one of the things that we try to do and that we're striving as educators and we're striving in our after school program is to make an impact on students. Sorry about that. Is to make an impact on students. We're trying to do something that we feel that we're giving ourselves, we're doing things as far as our abilities, our creativity, to really have an influence on a child. It might not be academically though. It might be social and emotional. You may be that person that actually has such an impact on a child that motivates them to continue in their educational field, that continues to try to be successful, to try to get out of the environment that they might be in. But one of the problems that we run into sometimes is burnout, compassion fatigue. We're so exhausted. Yeah, I'm skipping around. So we're so exhausted that sometimes what happens is that we just get burnt out. And as an administrator, as someone who, a program director, you've got to be able to recognize that when the teacher is going through that. You got to be able to see that when burnout occurs, it's almost a red alert. Will Robinson, if you remember that show, when the robot would say red alert, well, it is red alert, because not only is that teacher going to have some issues with students that they're engaged in, but they're going to have some personal issues. So it's very important that we're able to understand some of the issues that we face with compassion fatigue, and burnout is one. Secondary traumatic stress and vicarious trauma. Basically, when you're unloaded every day on issues that children that you're working with, the problems that they face, you got to be able to channel, and you got to be able to know how to handle those situations. Because I know this, every one of you who is involved with children in any aspect, there's stories that you have been told that absolutely breaks your heart, that absolutely puts you into the point where it depresses you, where it frustrates you, where it has a physical impact on you. Those are things that hopefully that we're going to be able to share with you today. How do I deal with those situations? How do I deal with the traumatic stress? How do I deal with vicarious stress as far as something physically that's happened? This has happened that has caused such an impact on me that it's caused me to become numb. And I've had teachers that way. I've had teachers in profession that they actually had become numb to everything. Let me tell you what it did. When they would go home, it had such an impact on their family that the stress was so severe that they were physically sick, they were emotionally drained. They started making bad decisions with their family, even with their children. Their children would come and instead of saying no on situations that normally they would say whatever you want to do. So that's kind of the impact that compassion fatigue has you on a person. So it's important as in the workplace that we're able to identify this, and that we're able to look at some of the stress factors that we can help with to encounter that. Sherry, if you'll back the slides up just a little bit, because I kind of skipped on that. Compassion satisfaction is one thing that we're always looking for. We're trying to get into a workplace. We're caregivers. Everything that we do, we're caregivers. We provide care, not only academically, but emotionally, socially, spiritually, sometimes to the point we're trying to provide as much as we can. As administrators, as people who are in charge, one of the things that we're trying to do is to be that support team, to be that encourager. It's amazing what happens when we encourage people, when we look at the positives instead of the negatives. Being able to work with those colleagues are very important. And instilling that motivation about self, making sure that that person is doing everything that they possibly can with their abilities to be creative. I was at a school before I came to the State Department in West Virginia. And one of the issues that I faced, another school that was going through a toxic situation, was trying to find a way to, people have talent, people that do have talent, and being able to get that talent pulled sometimes is difficult. But one of the things I was able to notice is that just by observing, instead of trying to make major changes, I would never suggest going in and make major changes immediately, because that causes problems, that creates more stress sometimes. But one of the things I noticed was that we needed to look at the positives that we had and work on those. It took almost 2.5 years to make a change in that working place, in that work environment, because we had to filter through some things. We had some people who actually left. There's always going to be toxic people that you're going to work with. There's going to be people who are negative about everything. And you either got to help make changes with people like that, or there's got to be changes made as far as the working field is concerned. But anyway, we actually became a Leader in Me school because I saw some possibilities of some things that each one of those teachers had to be able to provide. And when they started getting that self-confidence about themselves, when they started to look at some of the things that they were contributing to the school, instead of someone telling them what to contribute, it changed the whole environment. It's hard sometimes to listen to people when they have suggestions when you're in charge. One of the things about leadership that's very important, and making sure that we're being compassionate toward people, is to listen to suggestions. Now, that doesn't mean you change every time you hear a suggestion, but it's important to listen to those suggestions, because sometimes, believe it or not, some people that are actually working for you actually have some good ideas and actually have some good thoughts about what they could do to make some changes. Okay, next slide. Let me get that one. If you're concerned for your staff, we have, and we're going to show you the book here in just a minute that you can download. It's a great book to download. But we do have an evaluation that you can do, and it basically divides it. It's a 30-item question, and it divides it up into sections that it will show you where you have equitable treatment at the workplace. It scores that. It also gives you general employee workload. Are you working somebody too much? Are you overloading someone? The role clarity is very important, that people in your staff know their role, what they're supposed to be doing. Their managerial support, are you giving support? Professional development, are you there to encourage them? And being able to handle the time, being able to monitor and handle time. So there's things in this evaluation that will help you as far as to identify exactly where you're at, where your staff's at, and what directions that they need to go. Okay. All right, that's you, Sherry.
Okay,
You're
so am I still muted?
No, you're good.
Okay, thanks. So this book, which is, I think I sent the link in your chat, but we can send it at the end as well. It's a free resource, and it's saying that for every person, they need to be concerned about 5 areas of well-being: their physical well-being, their occupational well-being, their intellectual well-being, do they have an opportunity to learn and grow, social well-being, interaction and support of friends and colleagues, and emotional support as well. How well is their mental health? How good are they at managing any burnout or negative stress? What we're going to talk and focus more about is the organizational component of well-being. And you as a staff member, as a manager, as administrator, how can you make your work life better? And so that's hopefully we'll give you some strategies and tools to use for that, or at least things to consider. And again, there's a pull of stress inventory that can be done. And this is focused more on teachers and staff about where specifically is that job stress coming from? Is it the student and behavior, or is it the profession? Is it the workload, or is it perhaps administrators or other staff that cause the most stress? So these are simple tools that you can have your staff do to get a better handle, because they may find out that, oh, it's really, maybe it's the students. I'm a new teacher, I'm a new after school, and maybe it's the students and their behavior. So what they need to focus on are perhaps classroom management or developing positive relationships with their students, not necessarily trying to figure out how to improve their relationship with staff and management, or how maybe management might need to improve aspects of what they're doing. So it's real important to identify where at an organization is the stress and discontent coming from. So again, what is workplace well-being? We have this great opportunity as administrators, as staff, even as managers, to support and improve our climate for our students, for the families that come in, and those that are working in after school. It's extremely crazy right now. So think about what are ways that we can make a more positive work environment. So, organizational climate, this was a concept developed in the 1940s, and it comes down to the perception that your staff have about working at that job, in that community, in that organization. So it is a judgment value, and it is dependent on, and it can vary from person to person. But in spite of all this, it affects the productivity, the motivation of the employee, and how the employee behaves. So it's really important for us to get it right, to make sure that our climate, that our culture is one that is a positive one. And so the safety and supportive school model has identified 3 major components of a climate for school and after school, of what's most contributing to a positive environment. And again, it's engagement, it's safety, and it's the environment itself. So for the environment, is it a pleasant environment, or are there, or are the bathrooms atrocious? Is the academic environment something that's supportive? Do we consider wellness at all? Do we encourage our staff to focus on wellness? How's the disciplinary environment? Is it equitable, or is it harsh, or is it fair? With safety, do they feel emotionally safe or physically safe in that environment? If there's substance use going on, how are you handling that as an organization? And again, engagement, relationships. We will hear this time and time again, how important relationships are, not just for our students connecting with our after-school staff, but the staff connecting with their colleagues, and with the administration connecting in a positive way as well. Are we respecting people that are different? Are we respecting students that are different from us? And again, do we give, as an organization, a voice to our staff? So those are a whole bunch of things that we can do as to contribute to a positive climate. And I know I mentioned a lot of this. As a leader, are you working with the various stakeholders? Are you working with your staff? How do you address conflicts? Do your staff feel that they can come to management and talk about issues that they're very concerned about? Do we have an open ear and willingness to listen and to make things better? And again, how are staff supporting each other? Do we have that peer support? And does that peer support offer and support ways for our staff to become leaders in their own right? We also learned that a lot of things such as service and volunteerism are also very positive things to developing a sense of belonging, a sense of worth that organization has to stakeholders in the community at large. All right, so we want to move on a little bit now to consider some of the considerations for the well-being place. What are things that we can do as a manager or an administrator to really think about improving the workplace and making it less stressful? Of course, you can, there are different things you can do, but we're going to talk about the 6 major areas. Equitable treatment. So are our policies and practices, how we treat others, are they equitable? And what we're finding out is that employees think that their work environment is unfair, then they're twice as likely to burn out. We don't want that. We don't want good quality staff burning out because they think that they're being treated unfairly. We want our staff to stay and prosper and be happy there. So do a self-check here. How many of these things do you have and are doing? Do you have a policy that addresses harassment? Most of us do or should have, but do we have a policy to assess and address for fairness in our practices? Are we monitoring others' comments? Just even hearing, are people being fair or unfair when they speak about somebody else? How are we going to improve that this communication? It's okay to be critical of folks, but do we offer assistance to make that change? For example, is there a peer support group, especially if you have new folks coming on in your after school work? Is there someone there that can support them, that can mentor them along, especially if they're new and unexperienced? Another good choice is always looking at other after school programs, developing communications with other after school groups in your community and asking them, or even within the context of the statewide after school network, what are you all doing in terms of worker treatment? What are some of your policies? Do you do any special recognition? And again, you need to think about, are you providing staff clear understanding of how you treat them, what they can expect? And again, how are your staff evaluations and findings? It should be a way to improve not only your staff, but the overall organization by constantly improving staff evaluation process. So what about an employee's workload? Are we providing reasonable work environment configured and appropriate resources? Is your reasonable work pleasant? Are the obstacles acknowledged and addressed? Sometimes helping a staff member work through a very difficult time is to acknowledge, hey, we realize that it's really difficult right now, and we support you, and we are thankful that you're here every day, that you can be here. Sometimes just acknowledging that they have a lot to do can help them manage that workload, but then also help them want to stay and become less burned out. So again, compare, is the workload that you're expecting others to do acceptable? Is it normal? What about your curriculum? Is it based in research? Is it based in things that will improve the relationships and social emotional learning, academic enrichment? Are you identifying staff who can actually implement meaningful programs and articulate that to others, what they're doing and why, to the families? You can also compare other work conditions. That's always helpful, making sure that what you're offering to your staff is good and successful for them. Again, what are some, when you come up with obstacles, what are ways to assess that and then to move forward on that workload? So you can make little checks. If you find out as we go through these targets that there may be one area, maybe it's the workload, maybe it's another thing that you can say as an organization or as a manager, hey, or even as a staff person, hey, we might need to focus on X, Y, or Z to try to improve our climate and improve our work environment. We're there a lot. For after schools, it could be 2 to 6 hours. we want to make a place where people want to come and be a part. So role clarity, so many folks say, I do everything. I don't have good clarity of what I'm supposed to do, especially if you have really great staff who just keep taking on more and more responsibilities, to all of a sudden, they may not be able to get what their initial responsibility we gave them done. So we need to be careful about that, because also 40% of employees said that when they feel that their role is unclear and inconsistent, it makes them hard to sustain momentum at work. We want them to be focused. We want them to enjoy what they do. So you want to make sure that they are working on their main roles. And while we may have to say, hey, can you quickly come in and help with serving a meal? That's fine, as long as it doesn't become routine. I recently talked to an after-school director who lost their cook for a week, and they're trying to hire someone else. So the program, the executive director is stepping in and helping cook, which is wonderful. But think of how hard that is for that person, because they're now, for the next week or so until they hire someone else, responsible for providing meals and cooking for their after-school children, on top of all the other duties that have to be done as a director. So, please, if anyone knows who that person is, give them a high five. But again, for role clarity, do that self-check as a minister or a manager. Do you have a good role description for jobs? And when you hire them, does the staff person have a clear understanding of what's expected? And then also, are there good pathways for after-school careers? How does that work? How does someone starting in as a child care worker can come? And I know we have an ACDS certification program that can then roll into a 2-year associate's degree, who then can roll into a 4-year degree. So there is a pathway, but how many of us let our staff know about that and encourage our staff to be a part of that? Some of you already have a 4-year degree as your teachers, but a lot of child care workers that do after school are not at that level of a degree yet. So there are career pathways, and we encourage those. And then finally, what about managerial support? How are supervisors engaging with staff and making, and helping them solve those problems? Some staff want to solve it all themselves, which is fine. But are they communicating with the supervisor that there is a problem to begin with? Because sometimes if that problem is systemic, if it's elsewhere in that organization, we need to work on it and try to solve that problem. So employees who perceive that their managers provide support, 70% less likely to burn out. This is a key role, to have a supervisor and a manager that cares and that can listen and help troubleshoot and solve problems with the staff members. They're not necessarily solving all the problems, but they're there to support and help solve. So how do we self-test that to see if we're having really good managerial support? Are we identifying and implementing successful supervisor programs? Sometimes we need to train our supervisors on how to be good managers. How are we comparing those policies that we put in place to help support and solve problems? Is our staffing, is it when we put in a schedule for staff, what is that? How does that look like? How are we making sure that there's a fairness to it? And again, how do we clarify input of effective supervisors? And then how are we partnering with others? How to improve our practices and that communication of manager and staff, but also that whole sense of having the staff understand that they are supported by the organization. So those are things that if you're doing everything, good job, and keep it up and share with others. If you find another organization or a child care center or after school program is having difficulty, share their success with you. Develop that rapport with other administrators so you guys can share and learn, because that's how we learn best, from each other. Time pressure. Wow. Yeah, I think I have maybe 5-10 minutes. I think we're good. But, employees need to have clarity about what is most important so they can get what is most critically need it done. And so that they have deadlines and expectations that are reasonable. So if they don't feel that they have time to adequately support and do their job duties, it's a high burnout. So this also is very important. 70% likely to burn out. I'd be making sure that they are not overly stressed with time and that we have good managerial support. So here's a checklist for us. Do we identify effective time management practices? Maybe there are tools or techniques that the way we set up a room before the class starts, or the way before we provide recreation or meals. How are the deadline timelines? Are we giving them enough, or do we need to think of things differently? Effective options when tasks suddenly change. If all of a sudden there's a crisis, how do we handle that within the organization, within that staff, within the management system? Are we able to say, whoa, okay, we need to search and change to take care of this one issue very quickly? And then how does that impact our total time pressure as a staff or as an organization? Again, what options, what happens if things fall apart, if our timing is not good, if we're having too much pressure on our organization, on our individual staff members to get things done? We need to go back and reassess. How can we make it better? And then again, let's look at the broader social support. How is after school perceived by your families and by the community? How are we as a state supporting after school as well? So those broader social support is also something that's maybe difficult for us to control as a manager or as a child care center or staff, but yet it is also important. So speak up, right? How are we as an after school letting folks in our community know about us and know the importance, and how we help lower crime rates, how we help support academic learning, how we keep children safe, how we give them a great meal? There are all these things that we can do, how we improve their resiliency because we offer social emotional learning opportunities for them. There are all kinds of wonderful things that after school does. But are we letting folks know how wonderful and how important after school is, and how key it is to a successful and positive community? So that's one thing we need to consider. And then, what about salaries and benefits? That's another key important thing. And again, look about that. And if you don't have enough, how are you as an administrator be able to fundraise that we can pay our people what they're worth? What are some ways that we can increase career satisfaction? Are we offering them opportunities to go to state and local and national work training opportunities? Are we bringing in really good professional development opportunities? Here are different ways that we can support our staff, as well as letting other folks know about the wonderful things that we are doing. Okay, so we are actually about finished. And what we hope for you to do is to kind of stop and think right now. What are some things that your after school is doing well? Are you good at measuring time, at clarifying roles? Are you really good at having a safe environment that's allowing your staff to talk about what concerns they have and how you can improve those things? Are your managerial support sufficient? Because as we're reading through here, I always thought that managerial support and time pressures, if you can get those things set out, as well as work your role clarity, you're doing really well. But you also have to have the equitable treatment. You cannot have folks perceiving that one person's being treated very, very differently than the others. So those are some things for you all to consider now. What is your plan? What is that one maybe area that you're saying, okay, we as a child care center, as an after school program, we really, really need to focus on? Maybe it's the broad social support. Maybe perhaps it's the workload. It could be several things.
Extra food stamps. How you know the 10th? 12th.
Okay. And so here is the Center for Wellbeing in School Environments. It's the Y Center. This is where we pulled this information from, and from some of our own experiences. It is listed, there's a whole list of acknowledgements that we would like to indicate all these folks and organizations work together to put together this Center for Wellbeing in School Environments. It is a free workplace session to help specifically teachers' well-being. I think it's really important for the childcare groups as well. And it's specifically for individuals. So it's not necessarily for an organization, but an organization could use this by saying, okay, we're going to have at staff meetings, we're going to go over chapter through chapter, and we're going to talk about how we can improve our physical well-being, how we can improve our organizational well-being, our social well-being, all those aspects of that, that is important to the after-school program. Because ultimately, if we have staff that aren't crazy stress levels, that they can be productive, that they're happy there. Can you imagine the impact that we have now? Instead of being stressed about X, Y, or Z, we're able to focus on working with our children and improving the children's social emotional well-being, their family's well-being. What a great opportunity we have here by just helping our own staff and ourselves manage our organizational well-being, but also individual well-being of our staff members. David, do you want to say anything else? I think we're just about done. Yep.
Anything that we can do to help you from the office, 21st Century, from our office here, Support and Wellbeing, we're welcome any challenge that we have to try to help you the best we possibly can. Let me say this, I said at the beginning of the program. You're 99% in great shape. There's not a situation where it's a toxic situation where you're at work. That's not what we're talking about. But you do need to do self-evaluations to see how you can improve. No matter how good your program is, there's always room for improvement. What can you do to give better support? And also, what can you do to make sure that burnout doesn't take place? Teachers, I'm gonna be honest with you right now, teachers are under a lot of stress. They're under duress and stress at the highest it's ever been because of uncertainties. And just like the presentation that we saw on self-care, COVID has created an environment where it's very difficult, and the after effects of COVID. So we've got to make sure we're being supportive of one another, that we're taking care of ourselves physically, emotionally, spiritually, intellectually, even just to read, just to take time to relax and read is a good little exercise. But if we can help in any possible way, feel free to email or call. I guess, I don't know if we have time for questions, but if we do, I guess we could do that.
Yeah, we do have some time for questions. Does anyone have any? I know in our chat, Christina said that they're really good at pre-planning activities, but it's been a struggle with the lack of employment options, and they're kind of stuck at that.
Yeah, well, yeah, the employee, unfortunately, there is no answer for the lack of employee office situation right now. We've got a shortage in healthcare and mental health, counselors, teachers, after school program. It is a major, major problem. If I had the answer for this, I would be on tour and making millions and millions of dollars right now. The only thing that I can tell you is that when you have an environment where it's enjoyable, relaxing, and people want to be there, you have a better opportunity to get people to work in your after school program than something that they dread. And listen, it's tough to say, ask a teacher right now to say, okay, you're working all day, the stress that you're under, and we want you for 3 hours or 2 hours after school. That's a tough task. However, you have people who, this is what they were born to do professionally. This is their calling, so to speak. And they'll be there to support your after school program. But you really, and you really gotta support them by building them up and making sure that they're appreciated. I think one of the problems that we have sometimes that we just don't tell people how much they're appreciated. Sherry, we appreciate you.
Thanks, David. We have a question. Do you have any ideas for strengthening health and well-being across a school district? That's
I do.
on my pay grade.
I do. Yeah, I got to be careful with this one. Okay. Mon County was really concerned about the well-being of teachers at the beginning of the school year. I did a presentation to them on self-care. Their central office has taken that to run with it to make sure that they're supportive in self-care of teachers. Here, as Sherry is showing you right now, is the document book that they were using. They're doing a book study. I would suggest, and I can't make a county decision. That's not me. But a book study on this is one of the greatest things I think you possibly could do, because as a group, as a collaborative effort, you could really look at some of the things that are causing some stress in the environment that you're working in. Now, the problem is that superintendent's got to buy into that. Administrators have to buy into that and so forth. And we have offered that. We have put that out there to offer that from the State Department, that we would help in any possible way with that. I think that between now and Christmas, a lot of school districts are going to say, hey, we got to have something, because the stress level is just unbelievable right now. And we're available to help in any way. Can we have the link?
I think I put the link in. I hope it was the right one.
Yeah, okay. That didn't answer it, but I mean, I can say professionally, after being a principal and a teacher for years, this is something that county's got to look at, districts got to look at, to really be supportive of everyone, not just regular school day teachers, but after school programs, so forth, the whole environment.
Absolutely. And it can start as simple as, helping your staff through this very difficult time.
I mean, your after school program could be a spark plug that really gets it started because of what you're doing with self-care. And, and school districts pick up on that, and teachers talk and discuss some of the positive things that are going on, and it spreads, just like toxic things spread, positive things spread also. So we want the positive.
Yep, it's true. And I do know some after school programs have actually said, due to COVID, they had different groups just meeting and talking of their staff, and that it actually strengthened that community. It strengthened the staff. It's because they were now talking in a way that they never had to in the past, and so they had better relationships. And it's been a very positive thing. So, we can improve our workplace. We as an organizational administrator or manager, and then also you have to get the staff on board. That's very, very important. And someone said, I'd like to have information to get that book. Stacy, we put it in the link in the chat. So go to the chat, scroll up a little bit, and you should be able to find it. And you can also just Google Center for Wellbeing in School Environments, and you should be able to pull out that as well on Google. I know we're almost out of time.
Yeah, let me add this one thing real quickly. Okay. First of all, thank you. Your impact on kids in the state of West Virginia, there's no way to measure it right now, but as years go by, what you do in your after school programs will have a lasting effect on children in the state of West Virginia. So from the department, from Sherry and I, and Christy Swartz, one of our new coordinators, we thank you tremendously for everything that you do, because we could never, ever, money is not a way to repay you in any way for what you're doing. The impact that you're having on children is everlasting. And you want to end up being an impactful person and you are. So from bottom of our hearts, we thank you.
I agree, David. You all are the ones that are making a difference every day by sharing yourself with the children. So, and all the students, be them, seniors in high school, to kindergartners and pre-K. So thank you very much. If there are no more questions, we're going to let you go 5 minutes early. If you have any other questions, just let us know. Lauren, do you have
Again,
anything to
You
say?
can call us
Thank you.
at the department, and anything that we can help you with, feel free to call.
I just wanted to say thank you, Sherry and David, for sharing about workplace wellness. And if you guys want to continue the conversation, you could do so by starting a conversation in the forum on the event webpage. But just thank you so much for sharing your experiences and these great resources. And I hope you guys have a good rest of your day.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.